Good evening, George Will here. Breaking news tonight from Buckingham Palace that fundamentally alters our understanding of the Sussex security controversy that has dominated headlines since March 2020. At precisely 9:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time this morning, March 30th, 2026, the royal household released a comprehensive 400-page investigative report documenting systematic deception regarding security arrangements, threat assessments, and financial accountability spanning a period of 7 years and 2 months. This is not palace gossip or tabloid speculation. This is an official government document compiled by the Metropolitan Police Service Protection Command, His Majesty's Treasury, and the Home Office Security Division, containing sworn testimony from 83 witnesses, financial records totaling $12,347,000 in documented taxpayer expenditures, and forensic analysis of communications metadata that establishes a pattern of deliberate misrepresentation that may constitute violations of the Official Secrets Act 1989, the Fraud Act 2006, and potentially the Theft Act 1968. The stakes here extend far beyond family drama or public relations damage. We are examining evidence that suggests coordinated efforts to manipulate public perception, extract taxpayer resources under false pretenses, and undermine legitimate security protocols that protect not just the royal family, but the broader governmental security infrastructure of the United Kingdom. The report identifies specific instances where false claims about threat levels potentially compromised operational security for other protected persons, diverted limited security resources away from genuine high-risk situations, and created vulnerabilities in protection systems that hostile intelligence services could exploit. What makes this investigation particularly significant is the institutional weight behind it. This is not a leak from anonymous sources or investigative journalism piecing together circumstantial evidence. This is the British government, through multiple cabinet-level departments, formally documenting what they characterize as a systematic campaign of deception that has cost British taxpayers the equivalent of building 3 fully equipped primary schools or funding 750 nursing positions for 1 year. The document itself represents 18 months of investigation involving forensic accountants from the National Audit Office, security specialists from MI5's Protective Security Division, communications analysts who examined over 47,000 text messages and emails, and legal experts from the Crown Prosecution Service who reviewed materials for potential criminal violations. The report's executive summary, spanning 37 pages before even reaching the detailed findings, states explicitly that the investigation uncovered evidence of willful misrepresentation, systematic manipulation of public statements to contradict documented facts, coordination between multiple parties to maintain false narratives, and financial irregularities that warrant referral to law enforcement authorities for potential prosecution. Before we proceed further, I need you to understand something crucial about what you're about to hear. The mainstream media will not cover this story with the depth and rigor it demands. They will focus on personality conflicts, family tensions, and surface-level palace intrigue while ignoring the substantive evidence of potential criminal conduct documented in these 400 pages. What you're getting here is a comprehensive analysis of the actual evidence, the legal implications, and the broader consequences for institutional integrity and public trust. If you want investigations that go beyond headlines and examine the evidence that powerful people would prefer remain buried, subscribe to this channel now. We don't chase celebrity gossip. We examine evidence, follow the money, and hold the powerful accountable regardless of their titles or public relations machinery. Now, how do we know this 400-page report is authentic and contains the evidence it claims to contain? This is the critical question any serious person must ask before accepting dramatic allegations, and the answer rests on multiple independent streams of corroboration that collectively establish both authenticity and credibility beyond reasonable doubt. First, we have the physical document itself, released through official government channels with proper security classifications and distribution controls. The report bears the formal designation HMT-MPS-HO Joint Investigation Report Reference Number JER 2E240847, dated March 28, 2026, and carries the official seals of His Majesty's Treasury, the Metropolitan Police Service, and the Home Office. The document includes a comprehensive chain of custody appendix documenting every person who accessed materials during the investigation, digital authentication certificates that cryptographically verify the document has not been altered since official release, and cross-references to 63 separate classified annexes that contain materials too sensitive for public release but available for review by members of Parliament with appropriate security clearances. Second, we have corroboration from multiple independent institutional sources that confirm both the investigation's existence and its findings. The Home Secretary acknowledged the investigation's completion during House of Commons questions on March 29, 2026, stating that the report contains disturbing evidence that will be shared with relevant oversight committees. The chair of the Public Accounts Committee confirmed receiving the full report, including classified annexes, and stated the committee will conduct hearings beginning April 15, 2026. Three members of the Intelligence and Security Committee have provided background briefings to selected journalists confirming the report's general findings while declining to discuss specific classified materials. The Metropolitan Police issued a formal statement confirming their protection command participated in the investigation and that materials have been forwarded to their Professional Standards Department for review. Third, we have supporting financial documentation from entirely independent sources that corroborate the report's monetary findings. The National Audit Office published their annual review of royal finances on January 23, 2026, which flagged anomalous security expenditures totaling $11.8 million during the relevant time period, and noted that detailed documentation was unavailable for transactions that should have generated standard paperwork trails. Freedom of Information Act requests filed by multiple news organizations between 2021 and 2024 produced partial financial records showing security payments to contractors that match amounts detailed in this new comprehensive report. The sovereign grant accounts for fiscal years 2020 through 2024 show line items for extraordinary security measures that align with the timeline established in the 400-page investigation. Fourth, we have testimony corroboration from sources who participated in the investigation process. While the report protects witness identities using numerical codes rather than names, 11 former palace staff members have confirmed through their attorneys that they provided sworn testimony to investigators between September 2024 and February 2025. 5 current or former Metropolitan Police Protection officers acknowledged participating in the investigation, while declining to discuss specific testimony due to confidentiality requirements and ongoing employment. 3 individuals who worked in media relations capacities have confirmed that investigators requested and received comprehensive communications records covering the relevant time period. The convergence of these multiple independent verification streams, each providing different types of confirming evidence through different institutional channels with different motivations and constraints, establishes the report's authenticity and credibility to a standard that exceeds normal journalistic verification and approaches legal evidentiary sufficiency. While we acknowledge that certain elements of the investigation remain classified and some witnesses remain anonymous for security or employment protection reasons, the publicly available evidence alone provides sufficient basis for serious examination of the documented findings. The key figures in this investigation occupy clearly defined roles that establish both their involvement and their accountability for the documented events. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, serves as the primary subject of the investigation based on his public statements, legal filings, and communications examined by investigators. His public claims regarding security threats, protection levels, and government decisions form the baseline against which documented evidence is measured. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, appears throughout the report both as a co-claimant in legal proceedings related to security and as an author or co-author of communications that investigators concluded contained material misrepresentations. Her media interviews and legal declarations provide statements that the report systematically contradicts with documentary evidence. The Home Office Security Division, specifically the unit responsible for assessing threat levels and determining protective security requirements for high-profile individuals, occupies a central position as the governmental body whose professional assessments were publicly challenged and whose internal documentation forms much of the evidentiary foundation. The Metropolitan Police Protection Command, the specialized unit responsible for implementing physical security protection for royals and other high-risk individuals, serves as both witness to events and source of operational records that document actual security provisions versus claimed security denials. King Charles III, then Prince of Wales during much of the relevant period, appears as a peripheral figure whose private communications with his son are referenced in redacted portions of the report, but whose direct involvement appears limited to offering private funding for security that was declined. Prince William, Prince of Wales, emerges as a cooperating witness who provided investigators with communications that contradict certain public claims, though the report notes his reluctance to testify against family members and limits his involvement to providing factual records rather than opinions or interpretations. Sir Edward Young, former private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, and Lord Simon Case, current cabinet secretary, provided institutional perspective on security decision-making processes and confirmed that standard protocols were followed throughout the relevant period. These individuals and institutions form the cast of this investigation, each occupying positions that both grant them relevant knowledge and create potential conflicts of interest or motivations that must be considered when weighing evidence and assessing credibility. The investigation explicitly addresses these potential biases while concluding that documentary evidence and communications metadata provide objective corroboration independent of any witness's subjective motivations or interpretations. The evidence documented in this 400-page report divides into 7 distinct categories, each supported by specific documentation that investigators concluded establishes patterns of systematic deception rather than isolated misunderstandings or good faith disputes about subjective interpretations. These categories build upon each other to create a comprehensive picture of coordinated misrepresentation spanning multiple years and involving multiple types of false or misleading claims. The first category addresses threat assessment misrepresentation and includes evidence that public claims about security threats directly contradicted formal threat assessments conducted by professional security services using standardized evaluation methodologies. The Metropolitan Police Service maintains a formalized threat assessment protocol designated the Royal and VIP Security Risk Assessment Framework, which assigns numerical scores based on specific criteria including hostile surveillance detection, credible threat intelligence from domestic or foreign sources, historical attack patterns against similar targets, and vulnerability factors specific to the individual's profile and activities. According to documents on pages 43 through 67 of the report, threat assessments conducted for Prince Harry between January 2020 and March 2025 consistently scored between 2.3 and 3.7 on a 10-point scale, where scores above 7.0 trigger automatic armed protection and scores between 5.0 and 6.9 trigger enhanced surveillance and selective protection for high exposure events. For context, the report notes that working royals conducting official duties typically score between 4.5 and 6.2, while the monarch and direct heirs score between 7.8 and 9.4. The threat assessment for Prince Harry after stepping back from royal duties in March 2020 placed him in the same risk category as minor celebrities who have received specific threats, significantly lower than working members of the royal family but above ordinary citizens. The report documents that these professional threat assessments, conducted by security specialists with access to classified intelligence from MI5, MI6, and international partner agencies, were never shared with Prince Harry or his representatives because he did not request them and had withdrawn from the official structure that would provide such briefings. However, investigators found no evidence that any threat assessment ever concluded he faced elevated risk requiring armed protection beyond what was actually provided for his periodic visits to the United Kingdom. The second evidentiary category examines specific public statements that the report characterizes as materially false when compared against documentary evidence. On page 94, the investigation quotes from a March 7, 2021 television interview where claims were made that security was removed or stripped away, creating dangerous situations during pregnancy. Investigators obtained internal Home Office memoranda dated January 18, 2020, February 3, 2020, and February 24, 2020, showing that protection officers were in fact assigned for the specific visit in question, that the Duchess declined offered protection for certain events where she stated she preferred private security paid for by the family, and that the Home Office explicitly offered to maintain protection at taxpayer expense if the couple were willing to coordinate their schedules with protection requirements and security protocols. The report includes email exchanges between protection officers and representatives of the couple showing 7 specific instances where offered protection was declined, with explanations that private arrangements were preferred or that the proposed security measures were too intrusive or visible. On page 112, the investigation examines claims made in legal filings that the Home Office decision to alter security provisions was unprecedented, irrational, and motivated by malice or discrimination. The report counters these characterizations by documenting 47 precedent cases between 1997 and 2020, where individuals who stepped back from official public roles saw corresponding adjustments to taxpayer-funded security, including Princess Anne's children who never received full protection despite being grandchildren of the monarch, Prince Andrew's daughters who received scaled-back protection as adults, and minor European royals from allied monarchies who lost protection when they moved abroad or withdrew from official duties. The documented standard practice, according to internal Home Office protocols on pages 130 through 142, consistently links protection levels to official role, public exposure in that role, and residence within the United Kingdom where the Metropolitan Police have jurisdiction and capability to provide protection. Third, the report catalogs financial irregularities and accountability gaps related to security expenditures during periods when arrangements were disputed. Between March 2020 and December 2023, His Majesty's Treasury processed payments totaling $12,347,000 for security services related to Prince Harry's visits to the United Kingdom and security consultations related to ongoing legal proceedings. The breakdown includes $6,200,000 for protection officers during 14 visits to the UK, ranging from 3 days to 11 days each, $4,800,000 for enhanced security measures during legal proceedings, including secure transportation, courtroom protection, and residential security during London stays, and $1,347,000 for threat assessment updates, security consultations, and coordination with private security firms hired by the couple. The financial irregularities identified by National Audit Office investigators include duplicate billing, where private security firms were paid for services during the same time periods that Metropolitan Police protection was provided, creating questions about whether both services were actually needed or whether taxpayer funds were wasted on redundant protection. Documentation shows that during a November 2022 visit lasting 6 days, both Metropolitan Police protection officers at a cost of $137,000 and private security personnel billing $112,000 were present simultaneously, with no clear delineation of responsibilities or explanation for why both were necessary. The report also identifies lack of standard documentation for expenditures that should have generated detailed accounting records. Normally, security expenditures above $50,000 require itemized justification, including threat assessment references, specific protection requirements, and approval signatures from senior officials. Investigators found that 23 separate expenditures totaling $3.2 million lacked complete documentation packets, with approvals provided verbally or through informal communications rather than through standard procurement processes. Additionally, investigators discovered coordination failures that resulted in wasted expenditures. In 4 separate instances, protection arrangements were made and personnel deployed only to learn that the protected individual had changed plans or decided to decline protection, resulting in wasted expenditures totaling $273,000 for mobilized personnel and resources that were not utilized. The fourth evidentiary category addresses media coordination and narrative management that investigators concluded demonstrated consciousness of guilt and efforts to shape public perception in ways that contradicted documented facts. The report examines communications metadata from email and text message exchanges between representatives of the couple and various media outlets, public relations firms, and legal teams. Pattern analysis of this metadata on pages 218 through 247 reveals coordinated communication spikes corresponding to negative news cycles or legal setbacks. For example, within 48 hours of a July 2023 preliminary court ruling that declined to grant certain requested remedies in the security litigation. Investigators documented 63 outgoing communications from representatives to media contacts, followed within 72 hours by sympathetic media coverage emphasizing threat narratives and implying government indifference to safety concerns. The content of these communications provided to investigators by media organizations that received them included talking points that directly contradicted documentary evidence regarding threat assessments, offered protection, and precedent cases. Investigators concluded that this pattern of coordinated media outreach timed to counteract unfavorable developments demonstrated awareness that legal proceedings were not proceeding favorably in strategic efforts to win, in the court of public opinion, what could not be won in actual court. The fifth category examines what investigators characterize as contradictory positions taken in different forums depending on which audience was being addressed. In legal filings in UK courts, representatives argued that security decisions by the Home Office were unprecedented, irrational, procedurally flawed, and potentially discriminatory, requiring judicial intervention to overturn administrative decisions. These legal positions necessarily implied that the couple disagreed with expert security assessments and believed they knew better than professional security services what level of protection was appropriate. However, in media interviews and public statements, the narrative shifted to emphasize deference to expert opinion and merely asking for the same threat-based assessment process that others receive. The report quotes from a January 2023 statement, "We are not asking for special treatment. We simply believe that security decisions should be based on professional threat assessment rather than family politics or cost considerations." Investigators note that this public framing contradicted the legal strategy, which explicitly challenged professional threat assessments and argued that family status should guarantee certain protection levels regardless of assessed threat or official role. This inconsistency, documented across 17 separate instances on pages 271 through 293, suggested to investigators a strategic decision to present different narratives to different audiences rather than a consistent good faith position based on principle. Sixth, the investigation examined private communications between family members that contradicted public claims of being cut off, isolated, or denied information and support. While much of this material remains redacted to protect personal privacy, the report's summary on pages 312 through 319 describes communications showing that offers of support, including private funding for security, were extended and declined or accepted with conditions that proved unworkable. One particularly detailed example describes a January 2021 exchange where King Charles, then Prince of Wales, offered to continue funding private security at an estimated annual cost of $2.3 million if the couple would agree to coordinate their schedules and locations with his protection officers to enable efficient resource sharing and security coordination. The offer was declined with an explanation that such coordination would compromise privacy and autonomy. The report notes that this contradicts later public statements implying that family offered no support and that the couple had no choice but to pursue legal action to compel taxpayer-funded protection because private alternatives were financially unfeasible. The seventh and final evidentiary category addresses what investigators term expert opinion manipulation, referring to instances where security experts were selectively quoted or their opinions were characterized in ways that the experts themselves later disputed. The report documents 3 separate instances where security consultants hired by legal teams to support the security litigation later contacted investigators to clarify that their actual opinions had been more nuanced than how they were represented in legal filings or media coverage. One expert, identified only as former Metropolitan Police Commander 7 in witness protection coding, told investigators that he was asked to opine on whether an individual with Prince Harry's profile could face security threats, to which he responded affirmatively because any high-profile individual can face threats. However, he clarified that when asked whether such threats rose to a level requiring armed protection at taxpayer expense, he had expressed opinion that the existing arrangements providing threat-responsive protection for UK visits appeared appropriate and proportionate. He stated that his affirmative answer to the first question was used in legal filings, while his qualified response to the second question was omitted, creating a misleading impression that he supported the litigation position when in fact he believed existing security arrangements were adequate. These 7 categories of evidence, each supported by hundreds of pages of documentation, witness testimony, communications records, and expert analysis, collectively establish a pattern that investigators concluded demonstrated systematic deception rather than good faith disagreement, honest misunderstanding, or subjective interpretation differences. The pattern's consistency across multiple years, multiple types of claims, and multiple forums in which claims were made led investigators to conclude that the misrepresentations were willful, coordinated, and designed to achieve specific objectives, including shaping public perception, applying pressure on government decision makers, and establishing narrative foundations for legal claims that lacked factual support.